Good afternoon. I want to welcome you to this session. My name is Nalita Gajadhar, and I will be your moderator for this, what I hope is a very interesting session for you. We're looking at the internet. We're looking at internet as a tool. We're looking at the whole notion of sexual harassment, its impact on sexual harassment, and indeed how we can manage it, and whether it was a serious threat in Barbados with regards to the tool, this beautiful tool being used to cause women and men's problems with their lives. The panel is structured this way, and I'm starting right at the bottom. We have Mr. Lennox Rochester, an occupational therapist. He heads the occupational therapy department at the Psychiatric Hospital, and he has been working in the field for quite a number of years. I like to say the personal things. He is a father. I really don't know him that well, but he looks like someone who cares. And the mere fact that he has taken a profession like this, and he would most probably see the impact of sexual harassment on the lives of the clients who he serves. Is he nodding his head? Yes, thank you. Sitting next to Lennox is Corey Sandiford. He I know for a long time. He has been one of those people who have been working around the issue of gender as a researcher, as a student, as someone who really wants to make a difference. He works with Patrice. He's been doing a lot of worthwhile research around the Caribbean. And any of you who want to know more about what's happening in a scientific way, not just the little stories that I might tell, which are good too, but true stories. We can talk to Corey about it. And again, you no doubt have information on him. I like to say that he is one of those young men that we can call on at any time. He does not seem to be worried too much about money, and so sometimes we kind of exploit him. But he's a good soul. So we have Mr. Corey Sandiford. And then we have Miss Ronelle King. Now this is the first time I met her, and I'm really very impressed with the work that she's been doing. I was in a meeting this week, and we were talking about issues of gender, and then the name Women in Leggings came up. I said, but why I've been doing this thing for so long, and they call my name. They call their name. But it's so good to know that the old folk like me can sit back and relax because you've taken it under control. You're working on it, and it's important that we have a legacy, that people are making the change, and you're doing it so exciting. There must be something exciting about women in leggings that makes it so exciting and interesting. That life in leggings. And I know I'm being very sexist, but don't worry. I get into trouble for that. Next to her is this Tony Broadbent. She works as a deputy representative of UN Women. Another young woman who I've met the last couple of years who has been a motivational person. She inspires you. She takes language and she changes it around so that the dumbest soul like mine or the most intellectual can understand exactly what it is that she's talking about. It is a joy to work with her over the years, and I hope that we continue to have that kind of a relationship. Thank you. And next to her, on my immediate left, is Patrice Daniel. Now, if y'all want the academic bios, y'all can get them. But I think that y'all prefer to hear more about these people who are talking about, who's going to be talking to you. I met Patrice a couple years ago. She joined the club that I work with. And at the beginning, honestly, I was very jealous of this bright girl. She was so bright. She was able, again, to articulate issues of gender in a way that I never could because I hate academic language. I honestly do. I got into trouble for that a lot at UE. But she was able to make it seem simple again. And she takes the theory and applies it in a way that makes sense. so that you move away from just having your own emotional attachment to the topic, but you see it really as an issue and an area that requires studying. And I really welcome her to the panel, and I know that you are going to benefit from the experience of these people on the panel. So we're going to just go for 4 to 5 minutes with opening statements from each person. And then, as I said, in order to make the evening or the time that we have here exciting, we need you to ask questions. We need you to challenge the panel. We need you to say that everything they say is completely wrong. They have a complete misunderstanding of the issue, and that we need to start over all again. And they're going to be willing to do that, to start over again. But this is the panel. I welcome them, and I really welcome your participation. So we're going to go, I'm going to go first with Miss Patrice. You're happy with that? Okay, let's go with Patrice. And we have a timing instrument at the beginning here. Sorry? Oh, I keep this. Yeah. There's a timing instrument.
A timing person.
A timing person. So we look at her and she's going to tell us when the time is gone.
So in preparation for this panel, I've been researching the founding principles and the mandate of the Internet Society. And I recognized very early that the purpose of the Internet Society is a very important one, a very worthwhile one. And the vision, what stood out to me about the vision is that it has one that states that the Internet is for everyone. The Internet is for everyone. And the mission of the Internet Society involves promoting the open development, evolution, and use of the Internet for the benefit of all people throughout the world. So in reading about the mission, the mandate, the founding principles, that overarching theme was very clear. The striving or the working towards a goal of making sure that the Internet is a safe and accessible place for every single person, that the person feels a sense of safety, equality, the ability to participate and engage fully without fear or threat on the Internet. So that's why I believe that the topic we're discussing today, gender and harassment, and aspects of it like sexual harassment will no doubt come up, and Internet activism is a very key and critical topic because as we know, and I'm sure I don't have to convince this group in here, the Internet is life. There is no separation, or the separation between online and offline is so blurry that it's difficult to say that even exists. The Internet is life. And since the Internet is as real life as any space, we know that life does not treat everyone in the same way. The package, the identity in which you enter this world very much impacts the way that you're treated by society. So people, depending on the identity that they present, their race, the color or the shade specifically of their skin, their religion. So if you can see, for example, a Muslim woman wearing hijab, the country of origin, whether that person has a disability, the social class they occupy, sexual orientation, and for the purposes of this panel, gender, we know that they're treated very differently in real life. And since we know that the Internet is real life, people are treated very differently online as well, depending on the specific identity that they present. So we are focusing our comments today on gender, so that's where the focus will be. And we know that much of the online harassment that is based specifically on gender, and that's a very important distinction, because as our focus today, most of the online harassment based specifically on gender targets women. And even when women and men are both harassed, they're harassed in very different ways. And I see my little warning coming up, so I'm sure that all of these different ways and the gendered nature of the online harassment will come up as the panel goes on.
think in terms of intersectionality, think in terms of all of the things that she talked about when she's saying how it affects people, but how you identify people and what that identity that you attribute to them, how you feel, how you use your own biases, how you use your assumptions of those people, and then put it in the context of harassment and see how you're able to challenge her on her theory. Yeah, so we're gonna have we're gonna challenge Tony as well. Everybody is being challenged to make it exciting. Miss Tony.
So yes, thank you, Nalita. I wanted to start with a comment that I had made outside to the fellow panelists. Today is usually it's Casual Friday where I work. And based on what has been going on in the news, I was ready to wear my Black Lives Matter shirt because I've been watching the internet. And what Patrice has been saying is correct. The internet is not only real life, it is a reflection of real life. So it magnifies privileges and oppressions that people are experiencing in real life. And that has its benefits and its challenges. Even the case that is at the forefront of my mind right now in terms of the legal case in the States, that is a case that is looking at not only race, but also gender and class, as Nalita was mentioning, intersectionality. So generally, we don't have a lot of data in the Caribbean specific to gender. We have a lot of anecdotal evidence. We have a lot of administrative data. So, for example, around violence against women, violence against men, violence against girls and boys, usually we don't have any prevalence data. We know surveys are happening in the Caribbean right now, but unless you go to the police or an NGO, we don't know what is happening. And that's where the internet has been very powerful in people sharing their stories. However, it also means we don't have a lot of data on harassment in the Caribbean. Pew Research has done a study on abuse and harassment, and it shows that 73% of all adults experience harassment online. However, those that experience the most harassment are usually young people and young women. This is something that I don't think is surprising to most of us. The difference with the internet than real life, because there is a bit of a difference between the virtual world and the real world, is that when you disagree with someone in front of their face, there are laws that govern how you're able to interact with that person. On the internet, unfortunately, because things and science is moving so quickly, there's not necessarily a framework that is governing that. We have sites that say this is how it should be, and 2 countries in the Caribbean have passed cyber legislation, but most countries in the Caribbean don't have sexual harassment legislation. So that cyber legislation does not take into consideration the sexual harassment that women and men face because, and this is an issue that I'm going to raise that sometimes becomes difficult, is when we're speaking about gender, and I think most people know this, we're not only speaking about women, we're speaking about the social construct, about how people feel women and men should behave. So if a man is not behaving in a way that society feels he should be behaving, for example, someone who is perceived or is out, or someone who is transgendered, the kind of harassment they face, or a woman who does not meet the standards of what we believe a woman should behave like, those kinds of persons also experience significant forms of harassment in the research that has been shown. I got my 1-minute warning, so I will just end with a quote that I think is not being acknowledged in terms of how we treat one another on the internet. Because I think that barrier, that virtual barrier, seems to distill the worst and the best of us. And it's by Robert Jones Jr., who is on the internet as son of Baldwin, and there's some other issues about him right now. But he said, "We can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist." And this is the challenge, is that when the disagreement on the internet becomes And the immediate tool that someone uses is oppression, based on how they think you should behave or the way in which they feel that they can be powerful, then we have to start investigating not only how we're behaving virtually, but how we're behaving in real life. No, you've got it.
Thank you. I got there, the key issues there that came out with the whole notion of privileges and oppression. And I know that we don't like, sorry? All right, I've been instructed to stop talking and to move on. Well, that's good. That's good. Let's go on. Let's go on to our next panel. This is in the interest of time. I know that she's kind to me. In the interest of time, we will go to Ronelle.
Hi. So I was asked to speak on how the internet was instrumental in life in Leggings. So basically it was born from my personal experiences of sexual harassment. One of the incident that I remember the most was when I was on my way to work, and this is the physical space, and almost being dragged into a vehicle because I rejected a ride to wherever I was going. So what I did was that I tried to go to the police, and I tried to make my report, but it was not taken seriously. And so I eventually just made a post on the internet. So after seeing a couple more posts, a couple more experiences, and being frustrated of what was not being done about it, I decided that to create a physical space where women could share their experiences of sexual harassment and sexual violence to show the prevalence of it. And that was how Life in Leggings was born. So I messaged a friend, we came up with the name, and within a few minutes of posting the first story experience, then friends, acquaintances, friends of friends were posting their experiences. Within days, Trinidad and other Caribbean countries and international countries had caught on to it. And that shows how the internet plays a role in activism, how you can disseminate information out there, how the strength of feminine solidarity, when we got the backlash of which we were expecting, the women who had never met each other, women who will never meet each other, they came together and they were so strong in the face of the misogynistic backlash that came that was so swift. Because from we know what was discussed, men and women experience harassment very differently. So when we were speaking of our experiences, it was kind of being invalidated, saying, well, I've never experienced this, and some women were saying, from internalized misogyny, that maybe if you didn't dress this way, you would not kind of receive that harassment, the respectability politics that come with it. So basically, what we created was a space to break your silence and also show that, debunk the myths and kind of start planning towards how to address it. So for showing that, if you go to the police, you're not being taken seriously, you can now start that conversation with the police and say, listen, let's start some training. And within people reporting it to religious leaders, saying the church has a responsibility in taking this seriously and not invalidating the experiences of their followers. So yeah, I don't have any more to elaborate on.
Good afternoon. I didn't want no 1 minute warning catch me in the middle of what I want to say, so I can just jump right into it. Life in Leggings, the hashtag viral response and online conversation that we saw in December 2016 was many different things. It was huge. It was unparalleled, I would say, in terms of any online conversation I've seen in Barbados or around the region. And it was interesting to see the cultural disconnect between men and women play out in terms of the hashtag and the response to the hashtag. I could essentially divide the male response to Life in Leggings that I saw online into 3 tranches. You had the eggplant entries, the hashtag eggplant entries, and then that other guy whose name I forget, and really not important, but the one who was recording videos as he was driving, talking about women and questioning some of the things that were being said in the stories shared by women on the hashtag. Those were deliberate attempts to harass the women, or harass the movement, or harass individual women who were involved with the movement. I could also toss the men in there who responded very strongly to the movement because they felt like their man who was being trampled on or whatever. The next tranche, you had the men who were more like, well, what was she wearing? And if you know the, well, what was she wearing as it relates to rape culture, you know that you have the men who will always question what these women were doing in terms of these stories that were being shared online, some of the ones that Ronelle just described. And for a lot of them, it was not their experience. They felt like they didn't have friends like that or whatever, and they were not immediately willing to accept what was being told to them. The last tranche, and I can throw myself in there, was the men who were outraged by what they were seeing being shared in these stories, the ones who felt like they had a lot to say, wrote some very long scholarly posts, and then tagged all their male friends in it and whatnot. And they were outraged that men could behave this way, and they wanted to do something about it. But all of these different tranches were also hashtagging what they posted, Life in Leggings. So you had a movement that was supposed to be for women, by women for women, and it's supposed to give the depth and scope of women's experience in Barbados and stories that were not being shared. It created a safe space for women to share stories that they would not ordinarily have shared with other women and with people, whoever was reading. And then you had men jumping in, talking about how they felt about it. And that, I would say, is a cultural thing. Like, it's not going to be within our nature, given how we're socialized or whatever, to just stop and think, well, you know, this is really supposed to be a woman's thing. You know, we were outraged and we just talked. We just jumped in the space and said what we had to say. And I then started seeing a lot of posts on my timeline, started questioning, you know, well, when are we going to deal with men's issues? And there's my 1-minute warning. Anyhow, the point is that we need a space that is separate for men. You can't have, if I could say, Life in Leggings was like the online equivalent of a general election in Barbados in terms of stirring up people's feelings and feeling like you want to do something and now is the time for change and all of that. But it can't be anything for men, and I hope I could get more into this in question and answer, but anything for men will have to be separate. It can't be piggybacking on this cause, or even though men were at the root of the stories of what was being shared, then dealing with the men and their issues and masculinity cannot then take place in that space. A separate space would need to be created in order for that to happen. Thanks.
Good afternoon. And I know most of you are wondering, what is the psychiatric hospital doing here? Right. Well, let me help you understand. We've asserted that the internet is for everyone, right? Now, we have a multiplicity of people using the internet, some of them with very vulnerable personalities, and it does not show, like my Kieran shows on my face. It does not show when you're on a screen, right? And my input here is working with people who've been victims of being treated differently on the internet. And I must say, I've seen more females than males, because it seems like females are more impacted than the males, or the males have different ways of dealing with stuff. Now, we did say that the internet should be safe and accessible, and it is accessible. I am not so sure how safe it is because you can't build in a program for a vulnerable personality. People would use the internet because they have a number of different needs, and they're going with expectations that these needs be met. Sometimes these needs are not always met. Youngsters go and play games because they won't feel a sense of being fulfilled and whatever else. Now, very often, sometimes they internalize things about these games which play out in their interactions at home and at school, and they become socially unacceptable. Now, I want you to consider an older lady who goes on a dating site because she's lonely, and she expects somebody, she would get, we call it a hit, right? And she's on there, nobody hits on her. Imagine the sense of betrayal, depression, and the whole thing, because she's gone in there feeling, I want friends, I want somebody to care, and nothing happens, right? Now, I'm not sure if we can build a resistance to that, because people have their needs and whatever else. But we need to consider the emotional fallout sometimes that can come from things like that. And I don't think people pay a lot of attention to that. Some of you are very, very surprised right now. Now, I see a lot of young people who are wounded, and a lot of it is betrayal, because we put everything up. This person has what, I saw a girl recently, and somebody put up her picture and a picture of a snake because something she said they didn't agree with. And that young lady was gutted. Because it's not just between her and that person, you know, there are thousands of other people who see that says, you are not a good person, you're a horrible person. So what started between two people now ends up all over the world, really, and that's an exposure. And of course, people don't know. People have their own opinions, and they say what they want to say. Now, one of my personal concerns is the whole thing about, what do you call them? I'm not exponent of the internet. Emoticons where you show those do not reflect any real emotions. People put where they want you to hear. Now, if you're the vulnerable person, you can imagine what's going on inside you when you decided to go on your keyboard and hit whatever and go into whatever site, and then you're met with all this disappointment and everything, and I'll end there. You can ask me whatever question later on.
Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the questions should come from you to expand the discussion. So we have time now for you to indicate that you want to speak. Yes?
Hi, my question is for Corey. My name is Asha Ford. I'm the chairperson of the Barbados IGF Steering Committee. Corey, it seems as if your comments alluded to the fact that men are almost only inspired to stand up for themselves and tell us their issues, then it's a reaction to something that women are doing. And I wanted to know if you find that to be the case, and what you think that is, if so. And I wanted to hear more about this space that you want to create for men to have their say, because I think that a big part of what is misunderstood about feminism and about gender conversations is that it's not all about what women don't have or what women need. Traditional gender roles hurt men as well, and I think that we don't hear enough about that. So I really want to hear more about what you envision this space for men to be like.
Could get another 5-minute slot to respond to your question. No, I would just preface what I respond by saying, as far as gender goes, I'm always learning. So even since Life in Leggings, I've learned what I did wrong during that time, right? So if I could tell you a story, during Life in Leggings, there was a thread or a couple of threads that were started in terms of private messages between men, like who, the same tranche that I talk about, who were outraged by what they were seeing, just talk about the fact that, you know, we should get together and discuss male issues. I expressed my skepticism, but I said I'd be willing to attend, and I could promise you that not one, it happened since since Life in Leggings, the viral aspect of it died down. No more discussion. There's no real sense of urgency amongst men to discuss our issues, or I guess when things come up. In terms of gender, you can never define gender in a vacuum, because you know, you can't just speak solely about men without talking about women, or vice versa. But in terms of men, we don't generally have a sense of urgency until something like this comes up. There's a lot of excitement, and then it dies back down. But I don't really think that men really see themselves as suffering. Look at the issue of harassment or online harassment. Nobody's ever sexually harassed me. I mean, I know that it does happen to some men, but it's always going to be different levels to it. In terms of what the space should look like, Ashel, to answer your question, I'm still figuring that out. I'm still figuring out because men, let's take the men in that thread, for example, they may say that they want a space, but have they actually done anything? If somebody created, would they actually participate in it? And how would they do so? I'm still learning even what the victims, responding to the survivors' voice should look like. I don't think that we know that as a society. I don't think we quite yet know what the male response should look like as a society. And even in terms of gender studies and studying masculinity, I realize that that's something that interests me deeply. But I also learned that I can't hope to do that in a gender studies space because that is not the time nor place for it. So I'll give it some more thought.
I'd like to hear what Mr. Rochester thinks about that as well.
Okay, let me just say men are misunderstood, all right? A lot of people think that men have no emotions and whatever else, but men have, I use the word again, multiplicity of emotions. One of the problems are, in terms of expressing them, they need to feel safe. Now, I am the chairperson of an organization called Mighty Men of Valor Empowerment Ministries, and we actually meet once a month to talk about men's issues, right? Now, we've had to put some females out because I don't know why they would want to turn up, but I guess women are very interested in men and men's issues. But we want the men, because from the time a woman turns up, men shut down, because if we are honest, we are very, very, very aware of being judged. And there's a general thing in society that the men who talk about their issues are weak men. That's a general concept. You know, there are men here who will nod their heads quietly, but they ain't gonna say nothing, so I can speak for all y'all, right? Because I can speak for all y'all, right? Because the reality is, yes, we have issues. We want to be heard. We want people to recognize what we are going through. I mean, over the years, men have had a bad deal. You've had the thing about men in crisis. I don't really believe that men are in crisis. I believe that men need to be helped in understanding who they are and look at their strengths and their weaknesses and work on that and work along with the females, because very often they're just competitive thing, and it shouldn't be. It should be complementary, not competitive. But there are issues, even, let's take it down to sex. Competition. And you hear the young boys, I can mash up, they say, that's nonsense. You understand? So we have to educate them that, you know, it's not anything about mashing up, it's a thing of working together, right? I'll stop for now.
Can we have the question or comment from the gentleman that might?
Hi, I'm Jason Hines from Internet Governance Caribbean and ISOC BB. And being just a tech person, I wanted to take up Corey on one of his comments and try to clarify if I should not create stuff and tag it with the hashtag Life in Leggings, or if it's okay to retweet a Life in Leggings type posting. And maybe the founder of it could also go. Thanks.
Jason, right?
Yes.
Right, to answer your question, I would say you're free to share, certainly, and I think you're free to create the post as well, but you have to remember who the movement is about first and foremost. It's about women, it's about women's experiences, and unfortunately, in this case, the women's experiences that we're talking about at the root of it is male behavior, but men themselves are not the focus. So if you're sharing a story as a man and it's about women, or about what you're observing about what the women are experiencing, that's fine. But if you want to get into treating to the male issues that you're seeing coming out in response to those women, then a different space is needed for that.
Hi. So I will just reflect on what happened. Well, so with the hashtag, it was easy for people to look and see other women's experiences and build the courage to share their own. We offered a part, basically, from our inbox for people who were not, I don't want to say they weren't brave. I want to say they weren't ready to openly share their experience and be identified with it. So we opened that space from our inbox to share their experience anonymously. But when they clicked the hashtag, when men were discussing it and they were, even if they were in support of it, you were seeing a lot of male responses, and for a while you couldn't see a woman's response. So it was kind of like drowning out their experiences, their space, and some of them took a step back for a little bit. And then you had some men who were saying, okay, listen, I understand you all feel very strongly about this, but just support and keep your comments a minimum. Let the women have their space. A lot of them have been carrying these experiences for so long, and they need this space to just release. So yeah, I think that supporting it, sharing the experiences is important, but yeah.
So just piggybacking off of what was said before, it's important when we have these discussions that we recognize that even if men and women are both harassed or violated on the internet, they're harassed and violated in very, very different ways. Because as we said, the internet is a representation, it is an extension, it is a reflection of real life. Therefore, the sort of harassment, the sort of sexual violation, the rape and death threats, the stalking that women experience online, they're not unique to women, but they are certainly by far the most victims of that. So women are harassed, violated sexually and otherwise on the internet in very, very specific ways because of their gender. So when you have a movement such as Life in Leggings or any movement where women or girls are saying that because of our gender, this is our specific experience, and it is one that is simply not experienced by men, especially gender-conforming men in that particular way, that is an important space for those women to have their voices heard. When we're talking about trafficking, the majority of victims are women. When we're talking about rape and sexual assault, the majority of victims are women. When we're talking about stalking, the majority of victims are women. And just because it might be a bit uncomfortable to confront as a society doesn't make it any less true. So when women are having their time to break open some of the deadly silence that has plagued us as a region, that is not the time for anyone who's not being harassed in that specific way to jump in and make the movement about them. So that's what I was getting from what Corey was saying, that of course there are times to discuss other issues, there are times to discuss how other groups might be facing their specific struggles, but when we're talking about online harassment, specifically on the basis of gender, men and women are harassed in very, very different ways. And it's important for each group and the way that they're suffering to be highlighted without being spoken over.
We have a comment.
Another comment? Yeah.
We have a comment from the online participants.
Okay.
Charles Walton from Barbados is saying that men will take a space where they can express themselves without their emotions being seen. So an online chat forum may be best suited. I think that was towards you, Corey.
Yes. Tony, you want to make a comment? You want to respond to that?
I was actually more just fixing the microphone there. But I do want to say one thing, and it follows on what Patrice said. When we're speaking about gender equality, we have to be honest about what our reality is, and that there have been historically certain privileges that men have had that women have not had, which is why harassment manifests itself in very specific ways, depending on the goal of a specific online movement. We always need both men and women to support one another. If the space is about sharing a particular kind of story, then let that space be given to those who are sharing their story. If there's another space to say allies. We need allies to not only share, but also demonstrate how you are going to support these people who have experienced a certain kind of oppression. That's a different kind of space. Life in Leggings was a very specific space for people to share their story. And Walking Into Walls, which is something that we did not mention, which is a Facebook group that Patrice leads that highlights all of the violence across the region and how the media reports on it, is a different kind of space where it would be very good to have the conversation, and they asked for the conversation.
Corey, the question was thrown at you, though.
A question.
It was a question in terms
I thought it was
of
just a
space.
comment.
If you don't want to, we can move on. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Rosemary Price. Just a quick question. Well, I have some other questions, but I will allow other persons to, in terms of time. Corey and or Lennox, do you see Life in Leggings as a direct attack on men?
If you see life as leggings as an attack on men, no, not even remotely.
Okay.
I saw a lot of comments like that talking about, attacking men, or let me just put it this way. In terms of my gender experience, I'm way past the point of seeing women relating their experiences they have experienced at the hands of men, or mouths, depending on whatever, because that could be verbal as well. I'm way past the point of that trampling on my sense of who I am as a man. And I there's a response to that sometimes you get with the not all men are like this. I've been there, I've done that too, and I'm way past that point. So no.
And personally, I don't see it as an attack on men either. What I will say, though, is that we need to be sensitive to each other's needs and concerns and all that, all right? But I don't see it as an attack on men.
And preferences as well.
Yes, and preferences.
Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. Pearson Broom here. Now, you've spoken a lot about equality, a lot about tolerance, and you've spoken a lot about the harassment that women encounter. And the earlier forum spoke about young people, well, the whole idea of activism. My concern is, how are you shaping the discussion with reference to the bashment music that pretty much peddles a diet of degradation towards women, a crass behavior, if I may say so myself, in society? How are you shaping the discussion to help create a different view, a different image to how women ought to be treated within society? Is that part of your discussion? Is that part of your activism? And this is what I was trying to convey in the earlier panel about activism and what are you trying to achieve? Are you there just to talk about an issue, or are you hoping to influence change in a meaningful way to create something new and different? Because a lot of the sexual harassment and behavior, listen to it in the bashment music. Everything is bubbling. How are you now shaping and it's being encouraged at the highest level, the radio, etc.? I think I've met the command from Ashel.
That's a difficult one for us to take because it really is outside, unless somebody who wants to go.
All I would say is, I guess I see it a little bit. I think that in terms of dealing with gender issues and culturally in Barbados, you have a number of people who are activists or work specifically in circles in Barbados. And the music, to me, is the other way around. What you see playing out in the music is based on what's going on in society. Yes, it's being played at the highest level. I would agree with you there. But I think that in treating the gender issues and pushing them to the center of the national discussion in Barbados is most important. And then you will see an effect, a spin-off effect in terms of treating specifically to the culture within that you see playing out within the music, if you get what I'm saying. You don't get what I'm saying? Okay. Music is a reflection of what exists in the society. If you see music becoming, I agree with you, but you have to treat to gender issues, and then music by an extension of that You understand what I'm saying? No?
Please, please.
There are two things. I think, I don't know if it's on, but I speak loudly. I think that I agree with Corey in that music is a okay. Right. I didn't turn it on. Okay, right. Okay, so I think that music is both a reflection of what's happening and music can influence behavior. It's both kind of like the tail wagging the dog. That said, I think, for example, UN Women has worked with musicians, with artists in the Caribbean, Mikey Mercer, TC, Natalie, as gender advocates. We have worked with activists across the Caribbean. We work with media personnel, but it's not only the media and the cultural arts that we see that are a problem. The way in which we systematize oppression is in many different areas. One of the things that I am interested in is how do we move from the hashtag? Because UN Women would never be a space where a life in leggings can start. I don't even think a bureau would be a space for that. We are specific kinds of institutions that do policy level work, that do advocacy level work. But it has to be a young Bayesian woman who has an experience that other people can relate to, that lights the fire of activism under a hashtag. Yeah, it's cutting in it up. That lights the fire of activism that would make a hashtag go viral or global, right? Now, how do you take that and make it a movement that the women who came before us, and Nalita, it's interesting you're calling me young, I'll take it, but not as young as these two, that they started for us. Because it's not the beginning of police trainings and work with the media and work with the radio. This has been going on for years. Why did Life in Leggings have that fire it did? And how can we take that fire from online into the streets to reinvigorate the movement that has come way before us is something that is interesting.
Yes, please.
I have had the privilege over the years, I'll get there. I've had the privilege over the years to see and be a part of many changes that have happened in this country. And I'm disturbed that with the advent of the internet and what it can do, the potential it has, that it has been used as a tool to harass, to denigrate, to pull down, instead of building. We take the internet and we use it for negative as opposed to positive. All right? We talk, we do not do. It is time to stop talking and talk about doing. I am Faye Best, Secretary General, Barbados Association of Non-Governmental Organizations. We need to move from here and take things to the next level. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Faye. You know, one of the things, in listening to the discussion, one of the things, you can go back something like 20, 25 years, because you're talking about the cultural impact. And you would have had songs that were done by Adonijah that spoke about women. And Sparrow is a different field, because Sparrow is, I mean, when you analyze Sparrow's songs, it tells you what he says about women. But you've had songs that were positive songs, but they were not the songs that people thought would make money. They're not the songs that people want to hear in their fetes. They're not the songs that you want to go and jump up and walk up and stick back on. You know, we select the ones that we want to promote. And the thing is that you're not going to make changes until people see and feel that what they're hearing doesn't do it to me, or it doesn't do it to you, it also does it to me. Because it then objectifies me and you the same way, so that when you walk down the road, you are seen as the body who can push back, wind back, stick out, all of them things. You're not going to be seen as the woman. And then the whole thing about victim blaming. You know, I've argued for years, it's not logical, but I've argued for years, that if I choose to, I should be able to walk down the street how I wanna. And you should leave me alone unless I asked you to bother me, you know? But we don't do that, and we think that someone, magic wand, is going to come and make the change. The change starts with every single one of us. I do not get the videos that y'all get, because as soon as I get them, I delete them, and I delete the friend. It's as simple as that. I'm being told that we have time for one more question, and we will have that question, and then we will wrap up. Yes, sir.
Hi, good afternoon. Curtis Padmore from Simplified Apps. I'll try to be very brief. It's more of a suggestion, and there's technology available to help mitigate some of the sexual harassment messaging online. It uses artificial intelligence, natural language processing. Watson may be utilizing some of that. IBM is in the house, a discussion with them could be had. I know of one other tool that Google has as a project called Perspective. If you go to perspectiveapi.com, you should be able to take a look at it. But it helps to do some automated screening of some of the harassment language by actually analyzing the text. So I think it's a good bridge that we can go and utilize and even test in our own blogs to help manage that. That's just my to-do.
All right, thank you. We want to have like closing comments, something that you really want to say. You can't leave the room without saying. And you only have like a minute and a half to say it. So, you know, let's try to get it in.
Oh. Can I?
Yeah, you start and
All right. I just want to say, right, and I'm really serious about this. As a people, we need to change our bipolar approach to how we deal with each other. All right, let me give you an example. As a man, you cherish your wife or your girlfriend, but you look on another female who might be somebody else's wife or girlfriend, and you look at them with all sorts of things. I'm not going to say what, maybe including lust and whatever else. And that can also be disrespectful. Now, another thing is that we perpetuate things in Barbados as part of our culture. I heard this morning about this walk-up competition for only women and $1,500 and stuff like that. Now, and that's at the highest level, right? Now, there's some amongst us that is going to go and watch, and we're going to talk, oh, she's spin pooch and all that. But those are females that should be. Now, they might have made a decision to go and do that for whatever reason, but the reality is they still need the respect as females. And I think we have to respect each other and respect each other's, or nothing is going to change. And that's my comment.
Thank you. Corey?
I try to do mine in a sentence. Male behavior creates any number of issues for women and for our society, but we don't really study men and masculinity in general. But to keep in keeping with my presentation, that needs to take place in a separate space from women's issues and other gender issues.
Thank you.
I forgot most of what I was going to say. But what I will say is that there are a number of women who are now empowered to resist misogyny presenting itself as culture. We all have a role to play in eradicating gender-based violence and harassment in virtual spaces. And it's about realizing that role through discussions, from educating yourself, using the internet as a tool to research and educate yourself, because, you know, it has all that information out there for you to access. So yeah, we can make that change. It's just up to us individually.
Thank you.
Sorry. I think there are a few things I want to say, and I'll say it quickly. The first is that part of the challenge of panels like this is that we don't get to what the root cause is behind the harassment. So it's great that we have Google and everybody else coming up with this. It's great, by the way, that Barbados also has the Misuse of Communication Act that deals with some forms of harassment, but not cyber stalking, for example. But until we get to the root cause, which is an issue of power, If you think that you are entitled to police someone else's behavior or someone else, because of what or how you have been born, it doesn't matter whether you have the internet, the street, you will try your best consistently, especially when you feel challenged, to police that behavior. So the research, there's been recent research by UN Women and Promundo, because I don't think that the research has to be separate. I think we need to do work on masculinity. We have to do work on women's empowerment. We have to do all of the work together because we're in this world together. It shows that the men who are found to harass women most on the streets are the men who are the most insecure economically. They don't have the job they want. They feel like they haven't lived up to their potential. And they're the ones who go into the street and are able to assert their power because they believe there's a specific power dynamic that puts them over women. So they can yell at women, grab at women, and that makes them feel better about themselves. And that's something that we need to think of, not just say, oh, that's a terrible thing. That's something we need to think of to say, you have to be held accountable, and we need to address how you define your self-worth. When they looked at gamers, the people who were the most vile towards women gamers online, it was the men who were losing. The men who were winning, they didn't care if you were a woman, a man, or a toad. They did not care. The men who were losing were the ones who then started to say slut and everything else. Now, I personally, I do think the pooch back. I'm a Trinidadian born to Bajan heritage and Jamaican heritage. I think our culture is an interesting one. And I think that we have to watch, as Ronelle spoke about before, the respectability politics. I mean, I do think daggering is something we need to look at because that is something that does not look pleasurable to anybody who's dancing it. But whining and having a good time is something that we need to think about. But there always is a gray area that we are unable to fully investigate because we want it to be black and white, and because of the way the power dynamics of gender integrate in that gray area. And that's something we need to talk about. Because regardless of what a human being is doing, and this is it, regardless of what a human being is doing, if your default is to immediately say slut or grab something or talk about their anatomy, this means that you recognize your power over their behavior in a very different way that you recognize your power over somebody else's behavior who may look like you. So that's it for me.
Thank you.
So I'm thinking about one of the more recent comments that was made by Ms. Best, and I fully agree with what was said about the way that the internet is used very negatively to perpetuate gender-based harassment, violations, etc. But I don't know if it will help you sleep a little better to know that activists are out there using it as a tool for good as well. We are convening, we are using it to raise awareness, and I make specific mention via a very shameless plug right now of the Walking Into Walls page that was mentioned earlier. And that is one where all of the instances of gender-based violence, sexual violence that are reported in the regional media are compiled and put in one place for your easy access so you can really get a sense of what on and offline gender-based and sexual harassment violence looks like, all the actions by the UN, what all of the regional governments are saying, what they're doing, as long as it's covered in the regional media from Trinidad all the way back up, St. Lucia, etc., will be on that page. So that is a page that's a great resource to raise awareness. And I also know of many other pages where people are discussing their making, because there are all sorts of ways of making change. And one way of making change is to let people know that something is a problem. So these pages have that information to let you see that it is a problem. And the name of that page, again, is Walking Into Walls. So you can look it up and like it and follow it. So that's so hopefully you know that as the tool is used in a negative way, and it most certainly is, it's also being used as a positive way as well.
I want to thank all of you. I want to thank the panel. I want to thank you for participating. And because we said that we should take action, we just should not just come and talk, I want to tell you that the Bureau of Gender Affairs, with Ann Corey, we've been trying to form a group of men, of young men, of men who will use the technology, of men who will talk to each other and try to create a better society. And you can give me a call at the Bureau of Gender Affairs, or you could give Corey a call. He wants all these calls. Because we really want to form this space for men to be safe in, for men to talk to men, and to men to create a better society. Because we do need to have both sexes participating in this hard work. So I want to thank you all. I want to thank for the opportunity to be here, and I hope that we've added value to your conference.
Thank you, Nalita, for moderating the panel as well.